Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Sagan and 60. I wanted to check back in with Alex Vezina and find out, where we are on COVID-19 and all the lockdowns and preparation of vaccines, et cetera. Alex is the CEO of Prepared Canada, which is a emergency preparedness company. Alex has got a master's degree and an undergraduate degree in emergency preparedness, and he's been consulting a bunch of different companies and organizations on COVID-19 and other issues that you have to be aware of. And he's been kind enough to come on my show, 2 or 3 times previously to talk about COVID-19. Alex, welcome to my show. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Brian?
Very well, thank you. So, Alex, where are we headed? So it's I think on the 21st, we're supposed to open up. And I think a lot of people are thinking we're not going to open up. We actually could close down even more. Infections appear to be up. The vaccine has been approved, but it hasn't been really distributed widely. What's your assessment about sort of where we are today?
Depending on when this airs, to be honest, you may have already heard the news that we're not opening up as of the 21st, and this has been extended into January.
Is that your expectation?
Given what was said today from John Tory and basically the Premier's office and the announcements that are coming, yeah. It's not a question of if we're going into lockdown, but how broad the lockdown is going to be and how many regions beside the GTA are going to be included. So are we talking 1 hour out of the GTA, 2 hours out of the GTA? Just how much of Ontario is going to be put into this? The better question would be, do I think all of Ontario is about to go into a lockdown, including Thunder Bay? To which I would say maybe, probably not, but still maybe. But yes, we're definitely extended past the 21st.
So, I think a lot of people were hoping that things could open up for Christmas. You're saying not a chance?
No. Well, there's one chance, but you're not going to like the answer there. But I can go there if you want.
Go.
Sorry?
Tell me what the answer is. How do we open up for Christmas?
Okay, there's 2 chances. Chance number 1, basically, we realize that this is, it's the hopeless answer. So it's the fatalist hopeless answer. So we realize this is pointless. There's nothing we can do to stop it. And we basically give up. Which is not politically tenable and really not where medical professionals want to go. So that answer would be a reason why we open up. So basically we can't stop it being the answer. That'd be number 1. Number 2, there is a quite nuanced position that we can get into later as to how lockdowns under the Canadian strategy, the way that we do them, are actually counterproductive and increase case spread. So you can actually slow down how quickly cases spread by not locking down faster than you can by locking down. And that is a longer thing, which I'm sure we're going to want to get into later on, because that takes.
Okay, I think that makes a ton of sense. Because I've been concerned, and I've done a couple shows on that. I think that what we have done is we've not been stringent enough at times, and then at other times we've been too stringent in regards to lockdown in specific areas and only specific places, which has forced people to congregate in big box retailers, grocery stores, and in restaurants and malls outside of the GTA and Peel. And so therefore we've effectively concentrated people in less spaces versus the alternative would have been to distribute people across spaces. And, the example I've used is I buy my meat in a local pork credit butcher. There's never been more than 2-3 people in that butcher at a time, and I feel completely safe just because of the lack of capacity. Frankly, I go to my local grocery store, which is an essential service and is open, and there's dozens, if not close to 100 people in that store, and there's always a few people that are hanging too close to you and not obeying the arrows, and I feel a lot less safe in that grocery store that's packed, and then often there's a few people hanging out in the cold waiting to get in than I do in my small store. And so therefore I'm convinced that we would have done a better job if we would have opened up more places.
Yeah, okay. So
and allowed people to spread out.
No, I got that. This is the Costco versus small business argument, which regardless of my opinions, the medical industry completely disagrees with. So there's actually a completely different argument that is significantly stronger that doesn't actually look at that. And from the medical perspective, Canada has never locked down sufficiently anywhere, in any way, in any microcosm, other than the one time we brought people in and put them on a military base when they came over the border for 2 weeks. That's the only time when we've actually done it properly. in a small case, but we haven't done it properly anywhere as far as what was actually required. Because when you're doing a lockdown style strategy, you have to make sure people don't move, period, including going to the grocery store, which is
So you think we could have and should have closed down grocery stores?
If we're talking that strategy. But what I'm talking about, the reason why you might want to not lock down at all is more involved, and it actually doesn't really have to directly do with the difference between a large business and a small business. And by the way, there are reasons why those large businesses have to be open, which is another thing that gets a bit more complicated, but we can definitely go into. So okay. We got about 3 or 4 different segues here.
We're going to have an interesting chat tonight with Alex Vezina, the CEO of Prepared Canada. We're going to take a break and come back with some more in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting with Alex Vezina, CEO of Prepared Canada right now, an emergency preparedness company, about COVID-19. Alex, I want to come back to some of the conversation that we had in our opening little salvo there. What you were saying is that we should have locked down even more strenuously. Could Canada actually have locked down more strenuously?
Okay, so what I was saying there was that one of the strategies is locking down more strenuously, but we've done something else. We could have locked down more strenuously if we did it in the first few months. The reality is that for a variety of reasons, which can get very detailed into the way disasters work with every type of disaster, but the reality is that people only have the tolerance for listening to you, be it for fear reasons or the psychology of heroism or whatever. They only want to listen to you for 2 or 3 months tops at the beginning of an impact of something occurring. So that is your window to get everything under control.
And then they get tired.
And then they get, well, yeah, and it doesn't matter what disaster it is. And there's no way they last more than 3 months ever. You see with wars. You start seeing fatigue from that setting in right at about that point at the long end. Sometimes it only takes a week, but you never have more than 3 months. So you need to, if you're going to do it right away and do it really, really hard. Now, a really harsh lockdown is, like what we've discussed before, the type of thing where you completely shut down the border, and I mean completely, so you are disrupting the food supply chain. You lock people in their homes, and quite literally, you transport them to the hospital in an ICU, in basically a bubble if they're deathly ill. You treat the virus like it's the apocalypse. Right. And this has been done in a few countries almost. Australia is almost there with what they've done. But what they basically did was when you got to 2 or 3 digit cases, they said, OK, lock everything down. Whereas we're already at 4 digit and it's over. But anyways, you do that in the beginning. And if you do that at the beginning, you can give people that period of normalcy. So when it happens again, they've had normal for long enough. It's like a new impact. And then you have the 2 or 3 months again because they basically forgot that they'll listen to. This extended thing, you can't do it. What we have to do now, if you want to execute a lockdown strategy, would involve greater than what you can imagine a police state would look like. And even if we did that, because of the way the border is being handled, it wouldn't matter. We would have a new cluster come from someone coming across the border 2 weeks after we let up lockdown, even if we got to 0 cases, because we're not an island. So the ability to actually lock down and control this is now impossible. It cannot be done. If this was a different virus, if this was an easy virus like Ebola, we could do it. If this was almost any other virus, we could do it. We're completely beyond that now.
Why is this a problem? Because it's so much more infectious?
Well, it spreads before you're symptomatic, period. It's a highly infectious disease that spreads before you're symptomatic, that you don't have to, the delay period you have to lock someone up for so that you make sure they don't actually have it is 2 weeks. It's completely impractical. You can do it when people will listen to you, but at the point they don't listen to you, you need to have enough police that want to enforce to tell every person that you can't go anywhere. And I'm sorry, after G20 and various things that have happened, the police are not interested in corralling people and getting into that type of conflict with the population. They just don't want to do it.
Okay, but so you're saying that the lockdown didn't go far enough. And even today, we couldn't take it far enough because it would necessitate closure of borders and a police state that no one will be willing to.
Including the police don't want to do. No one wants to do it.
Okay, so if that's the case, then why do we lock down at all?
Well, that's the problem. The lockdown strategy is the one that you do when you're trying to go for 0 cases. When you have a highly exhausted
But we've got, a couple thousand cases a day, right?
It's not, but we can't get to 0 anymore. That's the problem. When you have a highly exhausted public that is not tolerating your stuff anymore, you have to go towards public health strategies that deal with when you have the public that does something that you don't want them to do. So a great example would be like with the AIDS epidemic and with addiction and drug use. So you can't stop all drug use in your country. It's not possible. So public health strategy here, the public health logic is that you're better off having safe injection sites where someone can safely do the drug than having them do it in an area where it's completely unregulated, because they will be too far from medical help and they might do something much worse than if they were monitored. Same thing with the importance, for example, with AIDS, condoms work strictly better than abstinence when you're trying to argue a way to deal with AIDS. You don't try to say, okay, no one have sex when you have a sexually transmitted disease. It doesn't work. The same way you can't say no one have parties when you have a virus like this. Unless you can actually police it, it doesn't work. You can't.
So let's talk about the restaurants then. If we know people are going to socialize and have parties, why not have them in restaurants where we can limit them to 6 people per table? We can put plexiglass in between them. We can.
No, it's better than that. There are restaurants that are willing to make plastic labyrinths that make it impossible, basically impossible, to actually spread COVID. There are ones that are willing to put plastic dividers in between your table and let you have a business lunch with someone through prison glass.
Okay, fine. But if that's where we are, and even with the restaurants that have just got plexiglass between the booths, and the waiters coming with masks, they're being closed down. Why does that make sense? Because
the public health department is completely tired of hearing anything, and they're no longer interested in hearing new ideas as of basically 4 months after the pandemic started in earnest. They've gotten proposal after proposal after proposal after proposal of people, in many cases, giving them fraudulent ideas or misrepresenting plans that prove that they have no idea what they're talking about, including over 1,000 proposals of people giving them disinfectants that don't work, that they've had to refuse, and they're tired. They've been overworked, they're understaffed, and they've been working the 18-hour days for a year. And
what you're saying is that because of that, what we've done is we've closed down restaurants, we've closed down gyms, we've closed down small businesses. We're having a huge economic impact on the community. We're forcing people into big box stores and grocery stores because we need to have some access to food. And we're not locking it down, and the infection rate goes up and up and up.
Well, yeah,
and
as you lock it down, the infection rate goes up more because people just have more parties, and the more fed up they get, the less they follow the rules. And they say, okay, well, if this is so ridiculous, I'm not going to mask anymore. I'm not going to wash my hands properly anymore. Screw it. And that's where people are going. That's where people are, frankly. So the point is, right, the public health department is stressed to the point where their ability to innovate is gone. They've ceased innovating because they're done, and they have a blunt hammer and they're smacking something with it because that's what they have left, and they have no tolerance or energy left anymore, which I said was going to happen in March. But regardless, like this is where we are, and the government has basically shut down that way.
So what are we doing? We're just waiting and hoping that this vaccine creates herd immunity by the spring or summer, and we're going to continue to have 1,000+ deaths and infections and whatnot for the next couple of months, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Okay, well, the vaccine answer, by the way, is about 5 minutes, so I'm just going to have to rant here for a bit if you're good with that.
Go for it.
Okay, go for it. So, best case scenario, we hit herd immunity if everything happens perfectly with the vaccine by fall, winter 2021, start of 2022. That is absolute best case scenario. That is assuming the vaccine is better than the studies have been reported for reducing spread. This is assuming that you cannot transmit while the vaccine is out. This is assuming not everything goes off without a hitch. And this is assuming that we actually get more doses than we've currently ordered because a bunch of stuff comes online and we can order more faster. So assuming everything is perfect.
Why do you say it takes this 9 months?
Because we don't even have 10% of the doses we need yet. We haven't ordered them because they don't exist. We've rolled out in some regions, the doses that are going to go out before February aren't enough to immunize the hospital staff. If that was the only people you were immunizing.
So is this a problem with the capacity of the manufacturers, or lack of ordering, or just the approval of the vaccines,
Capacity of
or all of the above?
manufacturers. Capacity of manufacturers. Look, the reality is the global science community did something that should have taken 18 months in 9 to 11, right? The medical innovation has been astounding, but they just got them online and they can't produce them fast enough. The entire world is looking for doses. And once again, this assumes distribution is perfect, keeping in mind we're seeing measles outbreaks right now, which has a 95% requirement for herd immunity. And that's a lifetime vaccination that we've been giving out since 1965. And we're seeing outbreaks now. So there's a problem with people taking vaccines. And unlike SARS-CoV-2, unlike COVID-19, measles kills you quickly. COVID-19 has a lethality rate greater than 1%, so it matters. Measles has a significantly greater lethality rate, and we're seeing outbreaks of that. Like, there are
because there's so many anti-vaxxers.
That's one of the hugest problems, right? But if you can't justify the measles, if you can't justify the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, if you can't justify that to people, how are you going to justify the COVID vaccine? Regardless of that, distribution right now at the rate it's going, with the number of doses we have, we won't be immunized in time. You can't immunize the entire population in a month. It's logistically impossible.
Okay. And so I've had people on my show, infectious disease experts, that have said, you've got a vaccine already, and the vaccine is 6 feet of distance and a mask.
Okay, that's taken definitely out of context. There's no way that would make sense. So if they say
it says 6 feet of distance, and for sure 9 feet of distance, and a mask on both parties, says it's impossible to get the infection. And so therefore it's better than a vaccine because it's there right away.
I don't like that. So it depends on the mask, depends on if you have aerosolized issues, depends on what's happening in the room. In principle, I get what they're saying, and they're simplifying it to make sense. And sure, but you can't run a society that way, so it's irrelevant. Right?
Sure, you could run a society that way. You could enforce everyone to wear a mask.
I could enforce 9 feet at all times with every person wearing a mask in this entire country.
If you wanted to, you could.
Okay, so if I can enforce that, why can't I enforce stay in your homes? Because that's logistically simpler.
Okay, and what you're saying is we could have and should have.
How? Where are the police?
But people have just got tired.
5 in 1,000 people in Peel region are police officers, not 500 in 1,000. How can you possibly enforce that?
Okay, so Vice President Biden, that has been elected President of the United States, has been calling for 100 days of mask wearing and physical distancing starting January the 20th. Yeah. Is that just dreaming?
If considering how some of the states think of him, yes. Have you seen what percentage of his supporters think that he is what's the QAnon stuff this time? Think he's running a child sex trafficking ring and has a secret island where he's hiding all of the babies that he's abusing and sacrificing to Satan. Literally, this is literally what they think. Some of them. So do you think those people are wearing a mask? So, like, I get it, but I live in reality.
Okay, but if those people aren't willing to wear a mask, if those people aren't willing to physically distance, or those people aren't willing to stay home, how and why are they ever going to take a vaccine?
Well, they're not. Well, they're not.
So we got no way out of this until they all get sick and infected and hopefully recover.
And if it turns out that, I'm telling you why it's best case we're in, where it's absolute best case, we're at the halfway point basically. Anything but the best case, you run into scenarios where COVID is the new common cold. The common cold ends up killing people at high percentage rates, and we live with this basically forever. Because if the vaccine doesn't have antibodies that live forever, and we have to basically immunize over half the population annually or semi-annually, this becomes impossible. And we're just stuck. This is reality now.
Okay, but is that not the flu? The flu is with us forever. We have to immunize. You have to take a flu vaccine every year, and it does kill a certain number of people every year. And for whatever reason, we've grown
like for example,
accustomed to it.
Currently, COVID has killed more people this year than the flu in the last 10 years combined. Yeah, same idea. So we have the super flu now, but it actually kills people in numbers like greater than driving, where you care. So this means that you're in masks forever and social distancing the best way you can forever, or you accept that once you get past a certain age, we're saving on healthcare costs now, which has been said multiple times privately by people who I will not mention.
Sorry, what has been said privately?
That the benefits of saving on healthcare costs by letting the elderly die
is a benefit of COVID, that we shorten people's lives.
Well, when you shorten people who are very, very concerned about the economy and looking at the Canadian budget and how much we spend on healthcare, you would be surprised the types of things that get said in private rooms.
Oh my God, you're kidding! People are actually saying this?
Come on. You've heard private rooms before. You've heard people say way worse than that. People say some absolutely interesting stuff.
That COVID-19 is actually beneficial because what it's doing is cutting our healthcare costs because it's killing off old people.
Well, yeah. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. I've argued for the importance of extending lives as much as possible, but of course I've heard it.
We're chatting tonight with Alex Vezina, the CEO of Prepared Canada, about COVID-19. He's not giving us a very optimistic, but probably he's giving us a realistic view. He says we're at the halfway point, that we've got 9 months before the vaccine has been given to enough people that we get the herd immunity that we're looking for. And he says that's a best case. And that the worst case is that we don't get enough people vaccinated. And that what ends up happening is the COVID-19 is with us forever. And it ends up being like the common cold, except it ends up killing a lot of people every year. And we have to, if we don't want to get it, either get a vaccine every year and social distance and wear a mask forever. Pretty blank negative. We're going to take a break and come back more with Alex in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Second 860. We're chatting tonight about COVID-19. Alex Vezina, CEO of Prepared Canada, an emergency preparedness company, is with us. And he's given us a fairly stark, dark picture of the future, but I think it's something we need to hear because I think a lot of us are frustrated with a lot of the rules that have been put in place, and we're getting tired of them. And we've got fatigue. COVID fatigue is what people have been talking about it. But I've had a bunch of different people on my show and lots of people that you've probably listened to on other news channels that have talked about that mask wearing and social distancing and stay at home orders, isolation really works. And yet we haven't been willing to do it. And people have socialized. And I worry that, we take a look at what happened in Canadian Thanksgiving. We take a look at what happened in American Thanksgiving. Both situations ended up having big increases in infection and mortality and hospitalization right thereafter or 2 weeks thereafter. And I'm worried that it's going to be terrible in mid-January. I'm just worried that a whole bunch of people aren't going to follow the rules Christmas and New Year's, and early to mid-January we're going to be overrun from an infection rate, from a hospitalization, and from a mortality rate. And as Alex has pointed out, even by then we won't have even vaccinated the healthcare workers, let alone get into the balance of the population. But Alex, let me turn to this herd immunity argument just for a second so that we can talk about that for a minute. There were some people talking about herd immunity. I think President Trump talked about just let her rip and see what happens. What is the answer in Sweden? So Sweden did execute a herd immunity strategy, didn't have the lockdown measures, erred on the side of the economy, and it worked for probably 6 months. But then this fall it started to not work. And I understand infection rate, mortality, et cetera, have all gone up. And the other Scandinavian, the other Nordic countries have closed their borders to Sweden. What's your expert assessment of whether the herd immunity strategy worked or not?
Okay. Longer answer. First thing, by the way, as of right now, virtually every hospital in the GTA is at or past their surge capacity, and they've had to look at activating all their emergency plans because they have to look at canceling near all surgeries. So the horror scenario that you were talking about in January has already happened, and they've already publicly said it. So just so you know. Now then, to your other question, there's two variants of the herd immunity strategy, or the don't lockdown strategy, depending on the way you do it. There's the Sweden version where you basically say mental health is a greater is going to cause greater impact in death than COVID will. Japan actually agrees with that, but they did a different model because they trained their people on how to wear masks and how to deal with earthquakes from a very young age. So Japan and Sweden are both actually models of this, but the main difference would be one of them has a culture that is more communal and is understands health risk fundamentally because they train them in it, that being Japan. Now, in the Sweden example, if you compare the death per pop or death per capita, death relative to how big your population is number to the United States, you'll find that Sweden and the U.S. have been close to each other, or I believe the U.S. is actually outpacing them now. So Sweden actually, if that's the only number you're looking at, has been a better strategy than what the United States has been doing. And Sweden front-loaded all of their deaths. So it appears that when you have people openly defying your orders, COVID spreads faster than not issuing the orders in the first place. So the open defiance is a problem. And because of the way we're on trajectory right now, seeing huge percentage increases in cases per day, it's not long, as most epidemiologists and doctors are looking at, like I am, until we have the United States horror scenario of death per capita similarly. So it's difficult.
Okay. Hold on. Let's come back.
There's a lot there.
Sweden versus its neighbors. Its neighbors implemented stay-at-home orders and masks and social distancing. And my understanding is that their infection rate and death rate was ahead of where Sweden was for a while, but now Sweden is like 5 times where those rates are, and they've closed down the borders, which says that at least in Scandinavia, the herd immunity strategy did not work versus the lockdown strategy. Is that correct?
Kind of, not really. So Sweden outpaced everybody else early on. They front-loaded everything, and they've been fairly steady. Further, because they did a front-load death strategy that's trying to minimize other effects, whether or not their strategy worked doesn't really depend on how many COVID deaths they have. It depends on how many total deaths they have. So with them, it's really an apples to oranges comparison because their strategy was assume their deaths. Like that was the point. And when the public health department in Sweden came out and said initially that I know. When the public health department in Sweden came out initially, I see it. I know, I'm aware. When they came out and said that we are worried about the risk of mental health and we're worried about, frankly, the suicide rates associated with all the lockdowns and et cetera, they assumed the risk of deaths from COVID. So when you're comparing Sweden, because it's such a skew case against any other case, any argument you make is going to be a hindsight argument until you find out the total numbers when this is all over.
Okay, so the numbers that I've got for Sweden are that they did have a surge back in May, but that starting in late October, early November, it accelerated dramatically, and
sure.
And that's so November, December have just been atrocious in both infections and mortality, and that's why just recently the Nordic countries closed their borders to Sweden for the first time since World War II. Anyway,
yes, same thing's happening in Japan, and the point is the numbers are basically irrelevant for them. They're a skew case that is adopting a completely different strategy. They're not comparable. They're assuming they're COVID deaths. It's completely different. Where like a better case example would be Japan. Like if you're going to talk about that type of the type of slow spread no lockdown strategy, because Japan didn't lock down and they don't do the same type of spacing there. They're actually seeing an increase in cases as well. Everybody is.
Okay, and so you're saying the Japan strategy was what? It's
basically what we're doing with no lockdown. Essentially, is what Japan's doing. Although they're seeing a giant increase in cases too. But what happened with them is their social deviancy, their rebellion from the rules happened later, and it's happening to a lesser degree. So they're not having the same type of increase.
Okay, but what you're saying is that to a certain extent, number one, it was an island, and number two, they were wearing masks. And so therefore, even if they weren't socially distancing and even if they weren't locked down, they were wearing masks because that's a cultural...
Well, they were wearing masks and they know how to wash their hands, and they have, in some cases in the higher, more wealthy areas, self-cleaning walls, and they have bidets, and they understand how health works. Like Japan is the most progressive public health country in the world.
Okay.
So,
then
I mean,
you
that makes
said,
a big
then
difference.
you said, then you said that the mortality, that the infection rate, that the hospitalization, the mortality in the United States was comparable to Sweden, which had a let her rip strategy. And so what you said is it's actually worse to lock down and not adhere to the rules than it is to have completely open. Why is that? Because people flout the rules and get into bars and go crazy and go to anti-masking rallies.
That's part of it. So in Sweden, there was a general understanding of, okay, everybody, if there's a thing going on, please just be on your best behavior. That's basically what they said. And it was regular day life while there's a virus out there. So there was the general understanding of the flu is really bad this year. And that's the way they viewed it. So there was nothing to really rebel against. In the United States, there is something to rebel against. And frankly, the virus has become highly political. For example, by the way, bringing up the stats as per today, the death per million in the United States is 955. The death per million in Sweden is 779. The United States is way higher.
Where's the death per million in Canada today?
Canada's way below that because we haven't hit the same type of problem in the United States as yet, but we're beginning. We're way above the world average.
So 955, 755 or whatever you said
for 779.
779 for Sweden. So
Canada's
7/9.
Canada's 366.
So we're 1/3 per capita
compared to the U.S. Right. But more importantly, the world average is 213.
So we're worse than the world average
by a significant
below Sweden, which did a herd immunity by more than a factor of 2, and 3 times less than the U.S. average.
But the big difference here is just now are we hitting the point where we're going to hit absolute uncontrolled spread, which is happening during a lockdown that is not working, while the hospitals are having to activate all the emergency surge capacity stuff that's being overtaken. So every death that we get from a surgery that wasn't done because COVID canceled the surgery is a COVID death, which gets into a comorbidity conversation, which we can talk about in a second. But the point is that all of the deaths are about to happen in Canada. And even before then, with a working medical system, we've still basically multiplied by 1.5 of the world average.
Okay, Alex. So what's the solution? You're the expert. Tell me what we should do.
There's several. I mean, I told you one before about the public health thing. The reality is that we're so far into this and there's no political will. There is no solution that gets us out of this. There's just different degrees of ways that we can lose less. We're going to lose. We just have to lose less.
What are the best ways to lose less?
At this point, well, as I said, because we can't lock down, we can't you can't fully open like Sweden when you have a vaccine on the way and say to people, the vaccine's here, okay, we're letting grandpa die. You can't do it. The people that watch their loved ones suffer and the businesses that suffered just so we could get a vaccine would revolt. It would be complete chaos. So you're forced into adopting the strategy that you've adopted the entire time, which is pray and wait for a vaccine and pray and wait longer. And you do whatever is necessary to get people to please agree with you. And if they're revolting from something in numbers where it's increasing your spread rate, you can't do it. So we can't lock down because people won't listen and we can't enforce it. We're forced into creating safe COVID parties. Thankfully, the private sector is really desperate right now, and they're actually paying to do 17 years of medical innovation that the public sector didn't do since SARS the first time. And the private sector is innovating at a crazy fast speed. But unfortunately, because they're being hand-tied, they're not being incentivized to continue their innovation. They're just being closed down. So we need to have the Safe COVID Party open up before the Safe COVID Party is bankrupt.
And what is the Safe COVID Party? This is your arguments about restaurants with plexiglass and things like that.
That's part of it. There's other ways. There's a lot of really cool, innovative ways people are doing it. It's another great example is the dance industry, right? Like the dance industry has innovated. They're an after school program, dance, martial arts, etc. That they're basically daycare the same way that after school daycare is for older kids in terms of where your kids go to do something. They have innovated safety measures to a point that are significantly safer than anything remotely seen in any school in this country.
Really? Give me an example.
It's really involved. The way that they've monitored the spacing, they've actually mapped out and spaced people in the way that you can't do in a school. So they can actually control class sizes effectively. They have installed or ensured, and this isn't the whole industry, but ones that are trying to, really innovate on this, they've put hand washing stations around that the schools haven't. So there is a huge difference between hand sanitizer and hand washing, and the public health department has been very firm on this, and they've been consistently saying using hand sanitizer doesn't replace washing your hands properly. So these businesses have in some cases run the water to install the sinks to make them readily accessible. Making sure there's multiple entrances and exits and actually policing it, creating actual cohorts you don't break, unlike music and French teachers that go to multiple schools because there aren't enough of them in the board that break cohorts. There are so many examples. But the point is that you can have your kid go dance there, or when the parents are at work, they can lie, go with their friends and go practice their dance routine with their friends because they're going to do it. So you can have them do it supervised in a safe way where they'll listen to the dance instructor that's going to make it so they can actually get into a competition, or they're going to be unregulated. Those are your two choices.
So this is why you say it's sort of like the safe injection site, that this is where we know people are going to break the rules. And so let's ensure that they can break the rules in a safe public health manner.
Yes, let's ensure they can break the rules less.
But what you're saying is the public health are so overworked that they're not able to actually consider some of these innovations that the private sector has come up with. And so therefore they're just blanket rules for everybody.
Yes. And frankly, over half of the considerations they're getting are BS. So I don't blame them. And the things people have said, when you get someone who comes to you and says, honestly, what people don't understand is this is someone's father, mother, husband, brother, etc., and every one of these lives matter. And you deal with one of these people that sees a statistic like 2,000 cases and says that's going to be 200 deaths in X number of days, and they internalize every single one of those deaths, and then they see people beside each other in Costco, they're gone. They just shut off. I don't blame them. Think about the mental health load on the people internalizing all those deaths every day. They're not ready to innovate. So anyway.
So what's the solution?
Well, I just told you.
Alex, what's the solution? If private sectors are innovating, but public health aren't willing to deal with it, and so therefore we're not getting the innovation, and they're overworked and they're overstressed and they're seeing too much mortality, what do we have to dramatically and that 90% or 80% or whatever it is you said of the ideas they get are cuckoo and so therefore shouldn't be accepted anyway. Maybe the blanket rules against it are the right rules.
Except they're counterproductive. They're increasing cases. This is the problem that you get into when you do a strategy like this. It takes this much time and people get this tired. You enter a lose-lose situation where you need specialists in emergencies running the show, which we haven't trained for 30 years. My industry is buried in a ministry. And can you imagine the political fallout if we magically showed up and started taking control when people haven't even heard of us? The reality is doctors can't be in charge anymore because they don't know how to handle a long-term disaster. They know how to make sure you're alive for 5 more minutes, and they're extremely good at that.
So it's not doctors that should be in control. It's not infectious disease people that should be in control. It's not even public health people that should be in control. It's emergency preparedness people.
Which should be listening very carefully to what the public health people tell them and should be helping them triage these decisions. Because the public health department is being forced into making political decisions. That is completely bonkers. Okay, the public health department is currently being forced to manage health, politics, the economy, and psychology. And they don't specialize in all of those at the same time. We don't have anyone running the show that deals with making tough decisions all the time. You're having people who know how to make sure that people don't die make decisions in a completely different specialization. They're not supposed to make the decisions. They're supposed to inform the decisions.
Okay, what about my argument that says that we're cramming everyone into the local Costco and grocery store? And if we had opened up more places, particularly if they were adhering to mass social distancing, 30% capacity rules, et cetera, we'd be distributing people out rather than concentrating them in the places that they're going to go, because people still are going to shop, they're still going to go out, et cetera.
Sure, 80 to 90% of the cases are still happening in private gatherings in schools and private gatherings, really. So most of the cases aren't really happening in Costco, so it's irrelevant. I mean, it will help slow it a bit, but not enough to put a dent in it.
So you're saying 80 to 90% are happening in private gatherings?
They're happening not in Costco. That's the problem. Now,
so back in the spring, they were happening in long-term care. You're saying that's changed. We solved the long-term care problem, but now it's happening in homes.
Different types of case spreads. There's the type of case spread where someone enters a cluster, then the whole cluster gets it. So think about like one person, you have a family of 4 at a home, one person comes home with the virus and everybody in the home gets it, right? Those are those aren't the really big cases that you're concerned about in public health, because you don't want them to happen, but you want to stop the person from coming home with it in the first place. So a lot of that spread is, you can't really stop it. Now, the problem with long-term care homes is it's not a family of 4, it's a family of 50 plus, and they don't separate them the way they should. And there's a whole problem with long-term care homes, which we should get into it at a later time. But what you want to stop is the links where the homes get linked, and the parties is where a whole bunch of people don't follow any of the rules from different houses and then go back home, and then the secondary spread occurs. You don't have that same type of thing happening at Costco.
Okay, but again, I think that's happening because people are going to get together, and if restaurants were open up in safe manners, they wouldn't be getting together in that vein.
But here's the point. This is the difference in the argument. And this is what a lot of people aren't understanding that I'm talking to, especially in the private sector. It's not that you need to be open because Costco is unfair or because Costco may have different spread numbers than you, because the public health doesn't agree there. It's you need to be open because same argument as safe injection sites. They're similar, but they're very different, and they're distinctively different from a health perspective. You need to be open because it's a better alternative than them being unregulated. Not you need to be open because it's better than Costco.
Okay, well, I happen to believe that a bunch of small grocery stores that are adhering to the rules are better than Costco. Number 2, I believe that it's less concentrated in one spot when it's spread out to a bunch of other spots. And number 3, I think if you don't let them come to the local grocery store, the local bar, the local restaurant in a safe manner with low capacity, they're going to get together in people's homes. And you think about this mansion that was raided north of Toronto that had a whole bunch of people gambling because the gambling casinos were closed. People are going to get together and do stuff.
But Brian, you can't conflate those.
When it's back to people are going to take drugs and they're going to go and do it unsafely. And so therefore, I'm agreeing with your argument, but that's only one of the several arguments.
Number one mentioned there. I agree with you. It doesn't matter. The public health department doesn't. So it doesn't matter if it's correct. They don't agree. They don't agree, and you cannot prove it. You would need 8 to 12 months of academic studies to prove that, and we don't have the time.
So I had a guy from Mavati on who said he had 903,000 people that came through Mavati, not one infection.
Okay.
And yet he's closed down, forced to close down.
Okay.
And he went to 30% capacity. He went to 10 people per room. He put in better ventilation. He's got incredible cleaning, and he's still forced to close down.
Okay.
And talk about people, physical health, mental health, et cetera, negative impacts, as well as the economic impact to him. And public health tells he's got to close because of the rules.
Yes, and look, I can pull skewed data out from anywhere and prove that point. For example, in October, Japan had more deaths in that month from suicide than they had from COVID until that period across the whole pandemic. So I can make the mental health argument all day with actual death numbers, picking the right country all day, but the public health department doesn't agree. So if you say, look, my restaurant has had no cases, they will say, yes, but there have been cases in that country over there in restaurants. And when I get one case, like, for example, when they had those 50 to 100 cases in that large convention in February, that medical convention that turned into 500,000, when they say one case equals 50,000, so one case is too many. And I can close you and not have that one case, so you're closed. If your business is expendable, you will be expended because the public health department doesn't want one more case. If you don't shut down the food supply chain,
they're opening up Dollarama and discount stores and liquidation stores because they've got a tiny bit of food. Like, yeah. Alex, it's crazy.
I agree. I completely agree. And we've both worked with government. You know how interesting regulations get, and you know the interesting relationship between private and public sector and how non-perfect the system is. But when you ask me a question about what should we do, I have to operate in reality, not in what we want it to be like. And in reality, things are inefficient. And in reality, I have to deal with people that don't follow the rules, which cause deaths. And when that happens, there's a way to do things, and there's a way to believe that things will be done that won't work.
We're chatting with Alex Vezina, CEO of Prepared Canada. We've gone way over time. We're going to take a quick break, come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're talking COVID-19 with Alex Vezina, CEO of Prepared Canada. Alex, we've only got a couple seconds left. What do we do? Tell us.
Okay. Well, very quickly, first thing just to mention, especially with what I said about how long this is going to go for, like we're at the halfway point. Every level of government has already said this. I'm just telling you what they've already said and telling you what's already been said. It's just usually what happens is people listen to the 5-second soundbite and they don't listen to what happened right after, where they explain, by the way, the vaccine's here, but. So people didn't listen to the after the but. Anyways, as for what we should do, given the strategy we're on, the tactic we should be utilizing is the one that makes people agree to do whatever they're willing to do. The same way with safe injection sites, and the same way that we use to handle the AIDS epidemic. Abstinence is not going to work without a police state, and we can't do a police state because we won't. So we might as well let people open up and be safer than unregulated at home, because we're not regulating them at home. That's basically what we need to do. And you've heard me go into it in more detail, and I can give you case-specific examples in a different talk, but I know we're out of time.
Who's done this best worldwide? Anybody?
We'll only know that in 2025 plus. There's no way to know that. Anyone who actually gives you an answer on that right now is giving you BS.
Okay.
We can't know. We can't know.
Who do you think then? Who do you like the strategy of the best?
Australia is looking pretty good, but I mean, we thought Japan was good, and then it had a massive resurgence. China's looking pretty good, but there's some things that happen in China that we don't like, that we're not willing to accept, so it doesn't look really good. Australia and Japan are probably the two most interesting models for different strategies, but we're not going to know until we see the total numbers at the end. We can just give our best guess. But I told you months ago that the Australia model was going to be the model, so I'm not surprised.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You've given us a sobering look at COVID-19. And I think bottom line from my standpoint, Christmas, New Year's is coming up. Lots of people are going to want to get together. Don't. To the extent that you can keep your gathering small, distant, it's going to be impossible to wear masks when you're at the Christmas dinner, but, even staying a little bit apart from people, and don't get together with a whole bunch of families and have a big housewarming party, etc. I think what we need to do is think about the social distancing works, the masks work, washing the hands works. We're not going to get the vaccine for a couple of months yet to come, if not longer, according to Alex. And so therefore, let's be careful. And to the extent that you don't have to go see grandma and grandpa this Christmas, this is one Christmas that we don't need to infect them with whatever germs we've got. That's for sure. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
It all works. We just need to do it.
You hear that, everybody? Just do it. That's the Brian Crombie Radio Hour for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Saga 960 AM. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. And Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I've got a special 2-hour show from 6 to 8 both evenings. Join us. Good night.